the first topic that we're going to address today is why is it necessary to have the conversation about economic freedom for the Black community? Haven't we been free for years, right? Isn't that the whole point of Juneteenth? Is celebrating that we finally found out that we were free, that at that moment in Galveston in Texas. So why have this conversation about economic freedom? Why is it necessary?
So I'll jump in here. I think that for me, when I think about freedom, I'm thinking about choices and options. As kind of one side of freedom, you really are just about having the room to choose how you want to live, how you want to engage with your neighbors, how do you want to support your family. So, I think on paper, there's a history that offers a narrative about Black freedom. 1865, Galveston, Texas, Juneteenth holiday. Yeah, we learned about, freedom of our ancestors in that way. And we've been fighting ever since to really determine what that means for ourselves. And I think in our role, we got a lot of work to do to really extend that power to our business community. Working with Black businesses and DCEO, a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with, they feel connected. They feel like information gets to them late, and that's one issue that we're working to overcome: empowering people with information early and on time, because that's what gives you choices. When you know what's out there, you can choose for yourself how you want to engage information, how you want to engage resources. And so we're putting ourselves in that position early and often, getting in front of people, taking phone calls constantly, doing webinar outreach, connecting with our partners on the ground to make sure people know that we're really here. This isn't a pity pat game we're playing. We're really making ourselves available so that people understand what choices are there and they can engage that information and make themselves free.
Thanks for that, Matt. And, again, I just want to let folks know Jonathan McGee and Deputy Director of Regional Economic Development, and Matthew Simpson is our African-American Business Development Manager. We actually started on the same day. And, when Matt and I started, we wanted to make sure that everything that we did as Black men in this department, as exempt employees, we ensured that we applied that equity lens specifically when it comes to the Black community on everything that we did. And so I think you got freedom and then you got economic freedom, and they're two different things. Juneteenth was just about freedom, right? Because we know systemically, Black people in this country was disproportionately impacted, oppressed, and enslaved. So, before you can talk about economic freedom, you have to talk about social freedom, right? And so what happened was you had social freedom, and some folks didn't even know they had that. Now, what I think is amazing about the Black community, and specifically Black entrepreneurs, is their ability to bootstrap. And I think we saw that in the 100th anniversary of Tulsa, because we saw a community that bootstrapped and became economically free after they were socially freed with no type of guidance, with no type of support, and thrived. And then you saw it all destroyed in the matter of one day. And what that shows you is that real economic freedom begins with economic policy and inclusive policy, and policy that is aimed to specifically target and help bring to parity Black businesses. At DCEO, the reason why Matt has a role is because we know that there needs to be a resource exclusively for Black businesses. As someone who thinks about the bigger picture in terms of economic development and what that means, it's not just making sure that Black businesses have access to capital. It's making sure that, as Matthew always says, is education, translation, and activation. And ETA is something that I like to use because it's something that we really need to think about when it comes to how do we position Black businesses for success, right? So you get a grant, right? Do you know how to manage that grant? In addition to that, do you have a strategic plan about what your growth should be in 5 to 10 years, right? Economic freedom is incumbent upon planning, right? We know you don't plan, you plan to fail, right? And so I think that, it's very, very important that we start to build business acumen and financial literacy for Black businesses, because, then it gets into the conversation of not only just access to capital, but then how do I retain the income that I'm generating, right? And so at DCEO, financial freedom to me is tax incentives, the ability for businesses to retain their income, right? Because they're creating jobs in the Black community. It's also thinking about not just grants, but loans, right? And low interest loans that's going to give them that seed capital to grow. But more importantly, and I'll stop here because I can go all day. We saw a historic piece of legislation at the federal level that really gives us a lot of flexibility to think about venture capital, right? And that's a word that gets thrown around, but I don't think we really understand what that means in the Black community, because again, it was never meant for us. And so now we're in a situation where folks are talking about angel investments and venture capitalists. And how do we take programs and funding that has come from the federal level and craft programs at DCEO to ensure that Black businesses have startup capital? We have the ideas, we have the what and the why. It's always the how that I think is challenging for us. So true economic freedom begins with that financial literacy, that business acumen, and having folks like Matthew walking folks through what they need to do to ensure that they're set up for success in the future.
Well, that's a tough one to follow up. I know that we aren't necessarily going agency by agency or person by person, but I just wanted to add a few thoughts. I think for me, social freedom is one thing. And I think the panel today, the conversation is really kind of teased that out already. Economic or financial freedom is something totally different. And I think the piece that that resonates for me, not just in my role, but personally, is the fact that there are structures, there are systems, there is infrastructure, and that ties to policy, that while you may be socially or legally free, the systems, the structures, the infrastructure, the policies, and the practices that exist may not allow you to be financially free. And freedom for me is to really have choices that are real choices. They're not, well, I theoretically can do X, but I really can't do X. It is truly being able to look at every option and say, I want that because it's Tuesday. I want to do this because it's Wednesday. And being able to actually be successful to implement whatever that thing is. We aren't there yet. And we know that this country and others have had histories, legacies of policies and of practices that, while individuals may have been socially free, they haven't been financially able to experience true freedom of choice, of implementation, but also generational wealth. So as Matthew and Jonathan talks a little bit about the educational piece, right? Understanding how to access resources, but not just that. Then what do you do with those resources? How do you then build upon those resources? And I think one of the pieces here, and one of the reasons why, even having this conversation today, and the fact that this panel, this group of folks even looks the way that it does, which is exciting to me on so many different levels, is because we have to think about generations. What does the legacy and the impact of one generation having or not having access to do to our future, our collective future, and our individual futures? And again, back to financial freedom. I don't know how we can really think that we're free, or that groups of people are truly free, if they can't dream for their offspring and their future generations and their future lineages, that all of the choices are truly available to them. So we play a small part at the Department of Central Management Services in supporting our colleagues at DCEO and other parts of the state, and helping to, in a small vein, think about supplier diversity and helping to support economic development. So I think of my colleagues really working statewide, thinking policy capital P, and that's important work. And it helps to enable what we do at CMS around our BEP, the Business Enterprise Program, supporting actual participation in state procurement, and helping build capacity for businesses that, as we talked about earlier, maybe haven't had all the access to the resources, to the capital, to the venture expertise over the past years or generations, and to help them participate in the economic system of the state of Illinois. So again, I have to say, because I didn't say this at the outset, I'm just so excited to have colleagues like the ones we have today, their leadership with Director Sylvia Garcia joining us to be part of the work under the leadership of Governor Pritzker, but also joining us today. And I did not know, Jonathan, that you started the same day that Matthew started, because I met Matthew in February during a Black History Month event, actually. So I don't know why I didn't see you there, but we could talk about that later.